So welcome back to Witness Stories. This one I call Intuitive Engineering. Speaking of designing stuff or engineering things, it pays to be an innovator. See how I innovated to get my to overcome my problem with my eyes don't refocus very well. So I adapted reading glasses. Anyway, I just want to say here that another natural ESP skill, believe it or not, is inventing something, or so I have come to believe. Other psychic sources have said that everything ever invented or to be invented exists in the Hall of Ideas. I assume that exists inside the Akashic records, or maybe that all exists in the dimension of divine mind. But in my own opinion, the Akashic records are less a place and more of a way to connect as maybe something like a switchboard, one that connects to real existences anywhere inside of a selected dimension, like our physical one. If such connection is possible, why would that connection not go to the actual existence rather than a 3D record storage? Any actual existence of something, by the way, would always have conscious entities aware of it. That's the very definition of God. All things are conscious God, including a place, including a thing, including you. But anyway, either way, this kind of connectivity seems to be a possible reason for some odd occurrences in my own life. I am referring to the times that I have attempted to invent solutions to a need. In some way, I think these events were planned for me so I could see yet another way that our universe operates, because I've always been interested in finding out how the universe operates. So how I usually solve a problem, creating a solution, is much like meditation. I fixate my intent to address the problem, then I clear my mind and just see what pops up. So when something does pop up, I evaluate if that will work out. Maybe by experimenting with it in my head, and this always leads me to learn something. This also leads to another extension of the idea, possibly, or I may reject the original idea and wait for another concept to appear. I'm usually looking for a concept rather than a specific device first, then I move on to the device or physical solution itself. That's my process. Many times I am first exploring the fundamentals of the physical problem involved. Then I attempt to address each aspect of the details, which I dig out with the method I just noted. Sounds like classic engineering, doesn't it? I'd say more like creative inventing, and very much like the same process you would use in fantasy story writing. Often my ideas never come to anything material, considering all the normal reasons of failure, such as design limitations or funding, but sometimes interesting synchronicities have happened, possibly because of that shared esoteric library I have mentioned to you. So here are the more interesting synchronicities from a paranormal perspective. My first example is this. So I am a three-wheel car expert. That is a focus mostly just the dynamic fundamentals of three-wheelers. I have built one back in 1984 near the end of my university days. But a page forward to 2002, I started getting bugged by the idea that the world really needed something like that as a low-cost, high-mileage commuter vehicle. After all, my research indicated that 120 miles per gallon was possible in that platform type. As it turns out, maybe there was connectivity involved with being bugged on this subject. So, Back in 2002, I started designing and prototyping as a hobby interest. You can see many of these ideas on the YouTube channel Detalidon, Detalidon, Detalidon. Of course, I complained to my guides and angels that I did not have the resources to capitalize these thoughts, so I was just trying to inspire others to do it. And also that I would like some help with getting the idea out. Well, around 2006, not 5 miles from my home in Phoenix, Arizona, the Elio Car Company, that's ELIO, was formed and intended to produce a commercial version of my type of three-wheeler. Possibly if you look on the internet, you won't see much activity until about 2008 or 10 with Elio, but they did start. I did get hints by hunting for it. They did start around 2006. So Mr. Elio probably was thinking about this before 2006. So did I transfer some energy, some intellectual energy to Elio Incorporated? Or did I receive intuition that someone else was jumping into that game? Which one of those was cause and which was the effect? I may never know. With a shared mind, it's very hard to tell who started it or where it started from. But that was not the only interesting event of that type in my history. So here's my second example. Also back in college, my professor had a sailboat and spent a few discussions about the failures of when people tried to attach a kite to those sailboats to expand the sail area that was possible on the boat. Many failures trying to do that. Very dangerous events had happened. But around 1990, I started considering the sail idea. So I did my process, and I came up with a workable solution and built a scale model to test it. The model itself worked pretty good. But I was also at that time working at the Boeing Aircraft Company. I find myself one day telling a coworker about the idea at one point, and he pops up with the statement that he was working on the same issue. His design addressed the same dynamic issues I had focused on, but with a completely different type of a device to address it. My solution I called the H2OK sailboat, that you can also find on that YouTube channel via the Detalidon channel. So just a few years later after that, I found online that the Vestas sail rocket became a world-class racing boat that solves this same dynamic problem, and at that point held the world speed record. And in 2012, the Vestas Sail Rocket 2 updated that world speed record. So currently, the kite sail concept still dominates the world speed records for sailboats. So did these people transfer some mental energy to me, or me to them? Or did that come to all of us from the same psychic source because now the time was right? Who knows? So a third example. This one's a better one. Around 1987, I was still running a mile every day for my daily exercise, but sometimes I also had to babysit my own child. This was making it hard to get my run in on a daily basis. So I conceived of a push buggy with 14-inch wheels, bicycle wheels, and a dead man brake. That's where, if you let go of the brake locks down and will stop the vehicle. But this is just a little cart for a child. This would allow me to run my mile while also safely pushing my child around the block. I never built the thing, But 2 years later, they existed out in the local sports equipment stores. If I remember right, I had told my guides and angels, could they possibly inspire a company to make these things, since I didn't have the resources to experiment with it myself? So is that possibly what happened? Anyway, so now an even better example. My fourth and best example. So back when I was a teenager, in the 60s, I have 3 brothers, and we all did like to play chess with each other. But 2-person chess often left somebody out waiting to play. And a game could last, 15 minutes to 4 hours. It just depends. So I put my intuition to use, and I came up with the idea, or at least I worked on the rules for a 3-player chess derivative, which we called cutthroat chess. It involved a particular board design so you'd have 3 sets of chess players and a bunch of rules that you have to have that apply to that. And that was done or finished around the summer of 1969. It only took about, a few days, maybe a week or so to come up with the whole thing. All fine and good. That's great. But around 1989, 20 years later, I was working at Boeing and noted some people playing chess at lunch. One of those players was an odd fellow who was a member of Mensa, that high IQ club that people can join if you have a high IQ. And I noted he had the telltale personality of that kind of a IQ savant. Let's call him Tom. So over the next few days, I reverse engineered the cutthroat chess game from memory. And the next day, I found myself telling Tom about the game. In a very odd response, he says, "Oh, that," and just walks away from me. Just suddenly walks away from me, which is, sometimes the high IQ savant will do that. I think for what happened the next day, he simply didn't know how to address what he knew such that I would believe him. You see, he had been a lawyer in Montana prior to being a Boeing employee. While there in Montana, a person had given him a task to evaluate the licensing and product protection for a new game. And this game he called, cutthroat chess. So this guy, Tom, brings me the prototype with the 3 sets of chessmen still in packaging and gives it to me to keep. That was amazing. And inside, I find a letter that in part says, "Tom, what do you think about my prototype game idea?" Dated, the letter's dated August 1969. The same summer, I developed the game. Interesting. I think we maybe mentally connect, maybe we all mentally connect to everyone in a very deep but subtle way. And that's what these events make me believe.